he'll be talking on the future of OTT versus TV in Nigeria, how TV companies can survive and thrive in the current competitive combat for revenues. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, guys. I have the challenge of speaking before coffee sets in. But I'm going to try and make it as, I have 30 minutes and then we do the Q&A session. If technology allows us today, we'll wrap it up nicely. So when Ijoma asked me to talk about this seeming rivalry between traditional linear television and newer digital services, OTT services, I thought, hang on, this is a bit of a challenge. But I had to talk to some of my former colleagues, did some background research, and also giving my own experience in the industry and trying to just put together something that reflects my observation, something that also shows with some data where we see the industry going and what are the implications for both sides, people on both sides of the equation, and whether you are a content producer, whether you are a new digital player, OTT player, whether you're a traditional broadcaster in Nigeria, and what does it mean for each one of us. So we talked about my bio. Just go on, keep going. So like I said, this is really the route map for the discussion for this presentation. So the key for me is this battle for eyeballs and for dollars. What are they fighting for, really? And where are the battlefields? What weapons are being used? What kind of warfare? Is it an all-out war? Is it a nuclear war? And whether there'll be winners. But the more interesting thing for me is, how do you know that you've even won in a digital space? Because you know, as you hear me talk about, the thing about digital is that digital is evolutionary. There's no such thing as that digital has happened. Digital just continues to happen. It doesn't stop happening. And once you move in that direction, and that's the thing about technology these days, it's just that if you look at what the mobile phone was a few years ago, and what it is now with Apple, with iPhone coming in, and now new technology, it just continues to transform. You can do insurance, you can do all kinds of things on your phone now, and not just watch television. So the interesting thing for me is really, how do you know you've won? Even if you talk about, you're going to hear me talk a little bit about Netflix. When Netflix started as, you know, using a little bit of technology and sending videos or movies through the post office. And then it went purely digital, started streaming. And most of the TV networks in America were very glad because they said, these guys are not going to succeed. So they gave them all the content that they had. And now, Disney is launching. Apple is launching. Everybody's launching their own services direct to consumer. So Netflix is saying to itself, hang on, I need new alliances, I need a new strategy. So that just gives you an idea of how technology and how consumers are shaping the transition. So let's go to the next slide, please. Just, I'm sorry, so let me apologize up front. This is not going to be a labor of love. When I did this, I did it with the mindset that I had a clicker, but I don't, so you have to bear with me. So go on to the second slide, yeah? Okay, so I take it for granted everybody knows what OTT means. If you don't, raise your hand so I can point you out specifically. You don't? Okay. So I talked about technology, digital. What it basically means is that once you get on the internet, the content you get outside of your traditional TV that you use the internet to get. That's basically over the top. That is services that are delivered using the internet direct to consumers. Yes, madam? Any confusion around that? Okay, so your WhatsApp is OTT. It's over the top service. Yeah? In fact, applications that sit on your phone that you use that provide services to you, whether it be your Google Map, that in a sense is the OTT services, YouTube and so on and so forth. Yoroko TV, if you have Yoroko TV on your phone or at home, that's OTT services. And of course, linear TV is your traditional television services, your AIT or your so on, that are delivered either straight free to air or delivered to DSTV or so on. But there's really a service that provides that for you. Next slide. So this slide just kind of explains the evolution of television, how we've moved from the days of not having television to the days of where we now sit back and we're not even that leaning forward again. We're kind of like sitting back and consuming content. And you see the significance of this in some of the slides that I will show. Go on, next slide. So the reality for me, and you know, if you've heard me talk about this recently, I always use this picture to sort of illustrate that the model of television as we know it, as some of us know it, is broken. Next. And television is out of the box. It's no longer, there's no sense that, you know, we see the television. If television sits on your phone, if you can access content on your phone, then the reality is that this thing we have our parents used to put in the box, TV is out of the box. So again, this is important. If you begin to think that how you create content, a lot of people, if you go on Instagram today, those of you who have on social media, you have Instagram accounts, you see hundreds, thousands of Nigerians are creating content every day on their phone. And that's significant. And we are consuming that. And that's significant because it tells us that in the days of NTA, that will not be the case, because clearly you had to go to the NTA, you had to put it on the box. But today you get it on your phone, and today you can share it. And so TV is really out of the box. And it takes me to this other thing, where in an analog world, we had scarcity. We dealt a lot with, and this concept is really important from an academic point of view to understand that when you're dealing with a world of scarcity, even from a regulator, I mean, I've been a regulator for a number of years, so we kind of worked with this notion of scarcity, that, you know, there is bandwidth, and this bandwidth is scarce. And so if someone wanted a TV license, we had to license him with that mindset that we only had 4 frequencies for Lagos, so we will give you that. And so so that you could broadcast television services. Now, if you think about it, that now we live in the age of abundance, as Professor Clay Shirky says. Thousands of people are creating content and sharing that and distributing that online. And so the notion that scarcity is now a thing is gone. And indeed, the problem for not just for businesses, for regulators, is that we live in the age of abundance, where abundance is breaking all the notions, traditional notions we know, more than scarcity, because scarcity you can control. When I worked at the Film and Video Censors Board, we said, we've licensed this movie, we've classified it, or we've censored it, whatever we call it now. You knew that there were 10 cinemas in Lagos. There are just 10 of them. So those movies are going to 10 of them. That's how it worked in the analog days. And so you could control who went to these cinemas. But in the age of YouTube, in the age of people sharing materials on WhatsApp, the notion of you controlling how people saw that material just clearly goes out of the window. So you have to approach it with a different mindset. And it's not just a question of now trying to push everything under the carpet, because it will find a way to come out in the open. So again, this is important that you understand this notion of how to deal with not just from a business model point of view, but indeed from a regulatory point of view, that we live in the age of abundance. And abundance is both an opportunity, and if you look at it, sorry, I digress a little bit. So you go on social media, you go on Twitter, everybody has a voice. People are tweeting stuff. And we saw that in the last 2 days with the tragedy in South Africa. And everybody now has a voice, almost an equal voice. So the president of the Federal Republic tweets from the handle of tweet something, and some guy in Okokomaiko tweaks back and says, nonsense. What is he going to do? We're there, and I'm responding to the tweets, and I'm even amplifying it. I'm saying, and everybody's saying stuff, and it's leading to action. Some of them unintended, some of them very negative, but it's leading to action. So that's the point. So when you deal in that space, you've got to understand that, yes, you can tweet stuff in the digital space, but you have to do other stuff in offline. And I'll share some of those ideas. Sorry, I'm going a little bit outside of OTT, but I think it's important to understand the fundamental philosophy of where we are and how we operate before we start dealing with the hard facts. Next slide. So I promise now we'll start going into the meat of the presentation. I'm told I have 30 minutes. I've used like 10. Have I? Okay. So this is happening now. The digital revolution, all kinds of things are happening. TV is changing. Content, this last point is more important. If you look in this first box, the third point, the more content out there, the more important context becomes. And you're going to find out that in the age of all of these services, in the age of abundance, the importance of local content that's relevant to you grows even much more important. And I'll show you why going further. Also on the fourth part in the second box, social networking, the ability to share content is actually, especially within younger demographics, it's really expanding. So if you look at how one of the biggest shows on earth, Game of Thrones, got pushed to everybody, got to know about it, whether you saw it first. In fact, a lot of people heard of it first before they even watched one episode, and that's because of social media. But TV still matters, and I'll tell you why. These are the reasons. It's even become more important that broadcast television remains the most effective means of reaching wider audiences. And there's really no doubt about that, even till today, even with all, especially for us in this market. Next slide. So what's driving all this change? Technology is really out there. It's pushing, as I said, it's pushing it. And then this interesting fact, lower barrier to entry. That the fact is, the barriers are collapsing. So for me to call myself just think about it. 20 years ago, to call yourself a TV channel was something you would not even think about. In fact, 10 years ago, you wouldn't even think about it. But today, I can set up Emeka TV. I just put it up, put it online, put it on YouTube. In fact, YouTube says set up a channel. Afurivo says we've got 300 channels. So this really, the barriers to entry are just diminishing, just disappearing. So again, if you look at that from a business model point of view, from a competitive point of view, how are you prepared to deal with this age? That's why I said the philosophy of understanding that abundance breaks more things is clear, and you must have that at the back of your mind. And again, I'll share a little bit more of that. Next. Again, stuff is going on in the market. AT&T, there used to be a cell phone company, buys Time Warner, there's a media company. BT in the UK, that's a telephone company as we know it, buys Premier League. MTN is saying, look, we're launching this TV services. So it is changing. So market alignments, but more importantly, how consumers, because we are as a consumer, we are the ultimate. We decide, we use, so you can actually have a technology, but that technology, you design it for something, but people use it for something else. And then, of course, the business realignments and mergers and acquisitions and so on and so forth. Next slide. And so we begin to see the value chain changes. In the old days, you had the ones in black, content creation, service aggregation, and distribution. That's what it used to be like, yeah? But these days, you have service creation, the branding aspect of it. It's coming a lot more into play. How things are packaged, who packages it, the name under which is delivered. User devices are taking a big chunk in terms of the value chain. And of course, navigation and selection. Who would have thought? I mean, if you turned on your NTA in the past, that old box I just showed you just turned on to channel 10. That's it. You turn to channel 2, channel 5. But in this age, there's a search bar, and I'll show you that a little bit. So if any of you have got Netflix, your search bar is important. How the user interface is designed is critical. In fact, in my view, in the age of clutter, what's more important is navigation and selection. After you've done all of that, how consumers find the stuff that they want. It's extremely important. So you see here, now I didn't say next slide, you moved too fast. Anyhow, but you see how this is, and the word is, carefully, the choice of word is important. Evolution. Evolution means that something is constantly changing. Because how this is today, I cannot put money, I cannot bet and tell you that this model will not change. I don't know. But one thing, there are a few things that are constant, and I'll share that with you towards the end of the slide. Next slide. This is going to be available. And we're going to do a Q&A later, so we can talk a bit more about it. But you see how there's still some traditional things that are in play here, in terms of how you see the traditional video model, and then you see the evolving OTT model. Does anyone see anything in this new OTT model that's significant? Anyone's notice anything? It's more complicated. What did I tell you? Abundance breaks more things. But you know how to deal with complications. I'll show you that in subsequent slides. Next. So this is just to kind of, again, pictorially kind of show you what's happening and some of the services that are out there, especially for people who are coming into this discussion around OTT for the first time, just to give you some reflection of how that happens. But it's important because there's this notion of people often conflate video on demand and think that video on demand cannot be distributed by traditional media. In the case of DSTV, for example, you've got your box office. So this on the right side is important, that you can actually have a cable pay TV supported video on demand service like your DSTV now, that you have ability to consume video on demand services on that. But on the right side of this right block is the true OTT, which exists outside of cable of infrastructure, so to speak, that exists outside of infrastructure. The only infrastructure it relies on is broadband or internet connectivity. Next slide. Digital TV research gives us a forecast of a growing market for so we see there's going to be growth. It's already happening. But this is significant when you look at, sorry, I don't have a pointer or something. But the reality, you see that Netflix is currently cresting 150 million subscribers worldwide. If you look at the bottom there, the chart, that's Statistics projecting that in South Africa, for example, they'll get to, by 2020, and I think they've already surpassed that actually, there'll be more than 337,000 subscribers on Netflix. They've already passed that, from what I gather. But here's the reality check, once again, that as far as the reality is, pay TV in Africa is still, look at that slide, multi-choice numbers, 13.9, look at where Netflix is, as far as Africa is concerned. So it is still substantially a leader in terms of revenue, in terms of reach, in terms of everything else. Next slide. Yeah. And this slide, again, also demonstrates the reality in terms of the penetration when you look at online content that's streamed. If you look at Nigeria, we're not quite there yet. So again, you see, but there's a reason for this. And this reason is on the other side. And I've tried to explain that in Africa, the growth is still bedeviled by connectivity and data prices. So if you have to grow the numbers on the left side, you need to deal with data prices. About 2 weeks ago, we had a conference, regulatory conference on OTT, and we brought one of the foremost thinkers, Professor Sam Anwana, to talk to us about this. And one of the things he talked about was this thing about even where some governments are now beginning to raise revenue, raising the prices by taxing OTTs as well, and thinking, oh, because everybody's foreign, these guys are coming from the UK, Europe, so we're going to put taxes on them. But the reality is that on the bits and bytes, there's really no foreign anything. Ones and zeros cannot distinguish properly what's foreign and what's not foreign. Because at some point, we saw that many years ago, and I'm trying to illustrate that, where people will say, oh, DG, all this piracy of Oyibo films, it doesn't concern us. Oyibo films we're dealing with, so let's leave them. So you will go to law enforcement, law enforcement, but these are American movies, not really what. But very soon, your own product is in Togo, is in South Africa, and then you're complaining, oh, they're pirating our movies. How does that work? So it's the same thing. So we need to understand that these are the factors that we're dealing with. You have devices are still not that affordable. Even though the Chinese people are helping that, there's a lot of devices that are becoming a lot more coming to the market. Payment platforms are still an issue, still a big issue in terms of how do people access this? How do they pay? So it's still a major challenge. And of course, the revenue share model is still a major constraint, because if you, and I think that the telcos ultimately will be the key driver or be the key enabler to push our numbers up once there's more broadband connectivity and so on and so forth, and the prices come down. But the challenge will now be, how do we share this money that we're getting? Currently, in the Nigerian market, we think that the telcos are doing, please sit down with them. Can't let a beautiful lady be standing up. It's not how my mother trained me, or my wife either. These two people are very important. So revenue share model, from what I gather, is about 70-30. If you're lucky, you might get 60-65 or something like that. So it's still a big challenge. So, but they do have their own, the telcos have their own reason for that. The other thing is, from the reality is diversity of audiences. So if we say local content is important, and you're launching a new service, and because, again, this service doesn't just sit, can travel, how do you deal with a market like Africa? 54 countries, even in Nigeria. So you do a movie, you have to subtitle it, you have to dub it for English-speaking, Yoruba-speaking, Igbo-speaking, then it goes to our Swahili brothers. And how do you deal with all of that? So diversity, and because again, we have the challenge of how do you raise money for all of these things? So you do one movie, but you have to dub it, you have to let it travel. So it's a big challenge. And the last point that I thought is significant is also that the regulators across the continent are still dealing with this from a mindset of scarcity. They're not quite prepared, in my view, to deal with the issue of how do we deal with OTT. So you see a lot of knee-jerk actions. Oh, there's something going on. Oh, Netflix is in the market. Oh, let's slam them with this. Oh, there's Showmax is coming. Let's do this. So there's not a lot of thought, deliberate thought that's gone into this. And I'll explain a little bit more. But how many more minutes do I have? So I need to know which slides are more important so I can just, next slide. So this is not important. You can figure this out yourself, and that's the reality. But this again, I took this from a DSTV report. You'll be amazed how much strategic information is available in annual report, corporate annual report. It's just mind-blowing. But so this is on the left of the screen. You will see that pay TV is still 91%, accounts for 91% of the revenue and the subscriber base of DSTV, even though they've probably got the potential Netflix killer, which is Showmax. But if you look at it, sorry, my dear. But if you look at it, you'll see that it's still 9%. Yeah? So we're here shouting OTT, but they're looking at it, and from a business perspective, guys, 91% of my money comes from this traditional business. Why will I, and there's a conflict even within the group, and I talked about this at some other forum, where the thinking, the mindset that drives anything to do with this, I'm not going to cannibalize 91% of to go and do 9%, but I'll keep an eye on it. But it's a problem. It's a strategic problem that a business has to contend with. Next slide. So you hear, go on. So you hear this thing. This is where you begin to hear, instead of Netflix and chilling, is your Netflix and suffering, because again, your buffer, your data speed is so low. Sometimes I sit at home, I'm like, okay, let me just go to NTA. So because the speeds are so low. And this is significant, and I wanted to bring this up. I was hoping that Jason will be here so we can have a little banter about this. There's something Jason said that's instructive. Jason said, look, Africa is different. He says Netflix presence will have zero impact on Iroko. I don't know. He said this. It was quoted. I don't know what was in his coffee when he said it, but he said it. He's saying this. Meanwhile, the biggest player in the continent is saying this. CEO Calvo, an old colleague of mine, is saying, Netflix, left unregulated, is a big problem. They're blaming them for over 100,000 loss already of subscribers. So meanwhile, this guy is saying, nah, doesn't matter. This other guy is saying, government, come and help us. So you see, again, depends on where you sit and depends on which eye you're using to look at it. But next slide. I talked about the current marketplace. These are some of the things happening in the industry. You have AT&T buying this, you have Comcast, you have Orange doing this. But these are the conversations that are going on in terms of, so you have these two big international players, Netflix, Amazon, and now Apple. I think Apple is launching something next month, a new TV series, a new show, and they're making a big play on content. I think it's late October, next month, yeah. Amazon is already, they have not significantly come into our market, but they're eyeing it at this time. So, next slide. So the results are coming in. You're seeing mobile consumption is going up. There's always been a big appetite. As I was saying to you earlier, there's a big appetite for content on the continent. We love this. One thing that is not yet significant from an OTT play point of view is the issue of live sports. It's still a bit of a challenge, But I think that within the next year or so, you're going to see a lot more acquisitions in terms of sports. And that's inevitable. Because I honestly believe that is really the thing that is going to tip the scale to some extent in terms of OTT play. Next slide. Next. I mean, this is significant to the extent that it's just news blobs, just to show you what all the things is going on around the world. Next. So we're getting to the meat now, where Ijoma said, what's going to happen to broadcasters and content people and so on and so forth. So as I said earlier, remember that for content players, you will see the significant value for you guys if you're a creator of content. The demand on your side is going to significantly increase. The issue is where within the value chain do you want to play? And the top end, the premium side, the middle side, or the low end side? And the conversation around that. And I'll explain that one in a second. But the reality of the new entrants, device manufacturers are coming, internet service providers are coming in. You have your Instagram saying Instagram TV. YouTube is launching. You have significant new players coming in from that side. People who used to do something different, apparently different before, are now doing exactly what you might want to do. And they have significant market presence already. And of course, you see obviously your MTMs, your telcos are beginning to flex their muscle and say, look, why can't we do this? And we can do this. And some of them are beginning to do that as well. Next slide. So where's the value? On top there, you see the spend on content. It's growing. It's incredible. What the spend on content is. And the spend on content by people who were traditionally 10 years ago were not in the content business. Yeah? So it gives you, like, you find Facebook suddenly spending on content. You're like, hang on, I thought you were just a social sharing, social whatever site. But they're spending big on content. So it gives you an idea of where the value is, that perhaps in a year from now, your MTNs, your Airtels, and so other people will start spending also on content, because that's, if they need to get to the consumer, they need to put money on content and local content. So from a point of view of where the value is, you see significantly that content, the value of content is growing. If you look on the left side of it, you see that it's gone from 34% in 2011 to about 42%. So there's a +8 margin in terms of growth. And it will continue to grow. Because, you you need content to drive whatever services that you have. And even from the point of, and we saw that in some of the slides, I didn't put that here because I didn't want to jam up. But distribution of content, the people who traditionally distribute, the value, the role, what the slice of the cake that they have in the business is decreasing. So the value of content is increasing. But the people who distribute it, you're not as, I mean, you consider it like a traffic man, yellow fever, as we call him on the junction, who is directing traffic, yeah? If we now have autonomous vehicles with robots, you think what's the value of that, the traffic, yellow fever? It would decrease. Because if I get there, my car will stop me whether I like it or not, because the AI is connected to the traffic system, says, Mr. Mba, stop. Once I trafficate left, I must go left. So the yellow fever, his work is diminished. And we find that that's exactly how the role of distributors is acting, because a lot more people, the transactions are going towards the content side of the business. And so the aggregators and the content side are growing a lot more and more. Next slide. I'll run through this because I think that I always use this to point out where the value is this is rather theoretical, but it's important. So if you look at a mobile network, for example, the first block there, the ability to create content. You see that, again, from the previous slide where I talked about what the traffic warden illustration. They're not big on content. They're not significant. They're significant, but not that significant in terms of content aggregation. Digital distribution, because they already have the infrastructure, yes. But what they do have knowledge about is the subscribers. They know their subscribers. They know what their subscribers are. They know how much they spend. They have data on them. They have interactivity with their subscribers. So that's significant to know if they're coming into the business where the value is for them. Cable TV networks, your DSTV and so on, yes, they do very well with content creation because they create some themselves, they aggregate some themselves, and they're good with content aggregation, they're good with digital distribution, and they're good with. So you need to know where your strengths are and where the value of where the competitive threats will be. Terrestrial networks, great with content, not so good with digital distribution. They have 0 in terms of subscriber management. So when you're plotting what business, you're defining your own business, again, it's helpful to know, to have this value chain at the back of your mind. And in terms of the negotiations and the transactions you're going to have with any of these players, to know exactly, it gives you a good understanding to know, okay, MTN, I know what value you can give me, so the transactions and the discussions move in a certain direction. And then, obviously, independent content producers. So if you're an independent content producer here, your biggest value is the fact that you can produce a ton of content, all kinds of content. And that's your number one value. Next slide. So, who are the likely winners? Number one, I say, are content creators. They're going to continue to win. And they win because, the value of content moves. There's a chart that I said I didn't have here, which kind of explains it. So at the top end, the premium content, there's a lot more value going to that. There's a lot more attention going to your HBOs, your multi-million dollar, your multi-million naira kind of content. That's, a lot of people are paying attention to this kind of content. Your middle of the road content, not so much. It's still there, but not so much. You know where the other value is low-end value content. Your skits, your little snack content, your microwave content, things you just put in the microwave, 30 seconds is ready, you're popping it. There's a lot of value there. A lot of people. So you see the rise of your Lasisi Elenu, you see the rise of new stars using short-form content that would not have existed. He doesn't, and then he can ride on the long form, because now if I want to make a movie, I go and look for Lasisi to star in my movie because he's already got 10 million followers. That even the distributor, the movie distributor, the cinema chain, Filmhouse doesn't have 10 million followers. Lasisi does. So you can see how from the value chain, how people like that are becoming a lot more, again, a bit of a tautology, a lot more valuable in that respect. So for us in our market, free-to-air channels will still have a leg up. That's the reality because of again, the previous slides that I mentioned, low connectivity and so on and so forth, is still an issue. Subscription TV, we're already seeing subscriber losses, but they're trying to compensate with cheaper bouquets. So your GoTV and so on and so forth are coming, and they're making a play in terms of exclusive content that will only sit on their platforms. That's one thing that will keep them there. And they're also making a play on digital services. So obviously, for a platform like MultiChoice, it has to do Showmax. It had no choice. For me, I wouldn't go that route, but it had to do that. It had no choice, really. So the other players that will come in, TV distributors, people who distribute new OTT players there's a lot of value in that. Next slide. We're going to run. We're going to just kind of run through this now. I have 5 minutes. Somebody's eyeing me over there, so we're going to run through this. So as I said earlier, in this new world, discovery is key. If people can't find you in the age of clutter, in the age of abundance, you're not there now. Even if you have the best content, I can't find you. So those of us who grew up loving Ichoku, Village Headmaster, we can't find it. So as far as we're concerned, it's lost. But imagine if we can find it in one place. It'd be great. Next slide. So I'll leave you to read this for 30 seconds and we'll move. So you see the value of discovery. And the fact that the reality is people know shows. That's the number one thing. People know shows. That's the same way they know Lasisi and all those. People know them first. Your channel is... except you do one of the things that we'll talk about in subsequent slides. Next slide. Okay, so for broadcasters, really. So if I'm NTA, I've got huge library. Well, I think, if it's not been, somebody has not eaten a mal on top of some tapes, but destroyed the valuable content. But you got, because for the foreseeable future, that's where people are going to AIT, NTA, people are still, because remember again, known brand reliability is an issue. So if I wanted to go on internet to see what's going on in South Africa, there's so many, everybody's telling me this, I can't trust, I don't know which one to trust. Because there's YouTube this, there's Obi Asika sent me this on WhatsApp, that this person has sent, who do I trust? So to a large extent, the safe place for me to go is to go to channels or NTA and at least hear. Even if there's a little bit of propaganda in it, but at least there's some level of trust. Do you get it? So, and that's the key strength of broadcasters. And what they need to do is now to elevate those people and the content that they have into sub-brand like a Lasisi. They need to find a way to move them up, but still keep them under contract. It's important. And then the other thing is audience measurement. In Nigeria, I shared in some other presentations the advertising to GDP ratio in Nigeria versus Kenya, for example. In Kenya is 0.04. In Nigeria it's 0.0014. So we are, if you look at it, advertising, because there's no audience measurement, no data, analytics is poor, you don't put money on something you can't count, especially in the digital space. You can't. And so the more digital you have, the more data becomes important, and the ability to share that data with third parties and other people makes your service more reliable. Next slide. And this is something that television stations don't do, but they need to start taking risk. They need to build new skill sets. I'm going to run through this quickly. I'm still a consultant, so if you need so why will I be giving you ESPO? But the reality is, they need to build, you go to a TV station today, they will tell you that we've gone digital because we have a digital switcher. Or because we have a digital transmitter. That's absolutely nonsense. That's retarded as far as I'm concerned. And the other thing is focus on the consumer, because the audience are changing, they're moving in different directions. How are you going to get them? What are you going to do? You need to know how to get to your audiences, show them what's relevant. Again, going back to what we talked about, that the more content that's out there, the more relevant context is to the audiences. Next slide. because audiences are changing, habits are changing, forever evolving. And next slide. Sorry, guys, it's available, but I just want, because someone's eyeing me badly there, so I need to quickly move up. One thing I find is that, and I think is of necessity to grow, is that you're going to have to look for partnerships. You can't, remember, MTN is big. MTN has spent decades. It knows mobile. It knows it like this. But does it know television? Does it know content? Not really. We saw in that value chain I showed you. It knows subscriber management. It knows, but it needs, if it wants to get into this market, it needs partnerships. And so the same thing applies to those of us sitting on the other side of the aisle. We also need strategic partnership, not only with the big telcos, but also with ourselves in terms of how we create content, how we purpose content, and how we leverage on technology to deliver to audiences as well. Next slide. So I kind of ended with these admonitions. Because a lot of people think that I'm not sure what business they're in. If I ask people now, what business are you in? They're like, I'm a producer. What business do you think you're in? And I use this thing from DSTV to show that they moved from set-top box to computer to games. You see how they've changed the definition of, those of you who are watching, how they say they're a video entertainment company. And definitions are so important because people don't understand that. They go from a subscriber management company. When I worked there many years ago, it was subscriber management company. We had this mantra. Now it's a video entertainment company. It's important to know that because what it means is that they can sit on any of these devices. As you saw in the other slides where I said it can sit on any device. So the same thing again. Next slide. Because this is, the bottom half, this is how people, this is how people consume content. They consume it on a number of ways, on laptops, so the DSTV's business focus on redefining their business is important. Next slide. So for me, the future of television combines the power of linear and OTT. It has to. So the whole idea of rivalry, to some extent, is more of a technology thing than it is, because the consumer doesn't really care. Indeed, the consumer perception of content is still video entertainment. His conception is that I'm getting my content, whether it be on my mobile, whether it be on my TV, that I'm getting content. Whether I paid for it or whether it's advertising supported. So they're not really, so there's not, that thing of that there's like you gentlemen said, was there a fight? Not really. There's no fight. And if you're a content producer, there's really no fight. In fact, you should be happy that they're fighting, because the fight means that you get more. But the reality is that the more digital you go, the more the issue of brands becomes important. So your redefinition of what your brand is and what it means to the consumer becomes a lot more important. And of course, as I talked about, social media is going to have an impact. Data-driven advertising is going to be key. Subscription and so on is key. Next slide. I think I will share the last slide. Go on, next. Just keep going. With what DSTV, the trends, what they're doing. This is from the annual report of 2019, ending March. Next slide. Yeah, so this is it. So they say these are the trends. Too much?
More knowledge than money to pay for.
So, local content will remain a key differentiator. What we talk about content, that's it. And what do you see our response on that side? They continue to make investments. So guys, if you're in the content business, go on, you can just slowly roll down and wind me up because somebody's about to shut off my microphone. Just go down, keep going down, my slide operator. Yeah. And I thought to share this with you guys. Amazon, go on, just fill the page and then next slide. I'm ending in 2 minutes. Don't worry. Yeah, it's ended. This is summary. So for me, the fundamentals are the key. If you take anything away, just take the fundamentals. That is content, not technology, that will drive this. And even the more you have investment in content, the more the value of content will rise. And the lines, you know this thing about where she said they're fighting. The lines are blurring. The consumer in his mind doesn't know the difference between traditional TV, OTT. All that is just grammar. It's technology. He just wants content. He wants the service. Because if you remember at the beginning, I said TV is out of the box. So what's the notion of traditional? And there's really no difference anymore. And it will continue to blur till it's non-existent. Indeed, to a point where Hertzian spectrum that used to deliver broadcasting will become irrelevant at some point. It will now be used more for broadband. So the whole notion of it becomes scant. So guys, so that's it for this morning. Thank you very much for giving me your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Morning, members of the panel. Thank you so much for that insightful, thought-provoking presentation. Right? You actually kind of touched on every point that we're going to just discuss this morning. Actually, you also helped out with basic definitions, which I was going to start with. At least you touched 80% of it. I just want us to complete the definitions, right? And you really differentiated between linear and on-demand. And I want to throw to this panel as an opener is that now, furthermore, OTT, we know now that OTT is actually over the top. Anything that is consumed over the internet is OTT. Now, how does that tie into actually live TV, which is you also touched about? So I just wanted to start with that basic definitions. Maybe I will start with the CEO of Afriruvo in terms of defining what is live TV in this space compared to on-demand. So just, we have 45 minutes. We're supposed to have 1 hour, but yeah.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Okay. I'll answer this in simple terms. I'll say that live TV, like I understand it is where you don't have much choice over what airs. Because the broadcaster will, normally determine what, will air. But OTT or VOD, they're all, related. Is where the consumer is the king. So the consumer normally decides what he or she wants to watch. So, and this is very important depending on the space that you want to play in. So you have to have this in mind. That would be my very simple, definition of this, please.
Ryan, as an OTT player in the space, what's your own perspective? The difference between live TV, or what we call TV apps, and on-demand streaming? Because oftentimes, thanks to Mr. Mekamba, I really, did some clarifications, but we need to be able to understand, what this means, your own perspective as well.
Morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here, Daniel. It's a privilege and an honor to actually be here today. And I think, I actually want to commend this forum and this event because it's inspiring for me to be here. I've traveled across many countries across Africa, but what I saw yesterday and what I see today, and certainly the presentation was totally, spot on, inspiring, and I think that this market has got boundless opportunities. The infrastructure, the people, the energy is just truly inspiring, and it's amazing. So I think a round of applause for everyone here. So there's one of your 35 slide presentation. There's one particular slide that stood out for me, and it was slide number 11. And the reason that I took that slide specifically was to relating to your question, Daniel. What is live TV, and how does live TV relate to OTT? I guess.
Yeah.
And one of the things in this digital revolution is I think that we are in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment. We've got Netflix, we've got Showmax, but what is the future, and what is the next evolution of OTT? Because we're only just at the infancy of OTT. Netflix has been spoken about a lot. Showmax is launched in Nigeria recently, and it'll be interesting to see where that plays out. But I think in the OTT space, the real disruption is yet to come. And that disruption is going to come from the last person on your slide 11, which is Facebook. Now, if Facebook have to start investing in content, then we see an absolute disruption. And that's going to come because your microwave snackable pieces of content lives on those types of platforms. They've got tremendous reach and distribution. They've got more technology than all of the mobile operators in Africa combined. And for them to switch that on would be when we see the absolute revolution. So to answer your question, I think social media is definitely going to become what linear TV was. And right now, as we're in this holding pattern, as I call it, linear TV and OTT live together. And I think simulcasting content on linear TV with OTT is certainly a successful mix right now.
Okay, so from that conclusion, so social TV will become linear TV. That's what you're literally saying.
To an extent, yes. Okay. It'll become the trusted way.
All right. Mr. Obiasika, a prominent stakeholder in this space. So what's your thought on that?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Yeah, just as he said, following that kind of presentation is kind of scary. Emeka just offloaded more information than most people are supposed to take in this early in the morning. But it's funny, actually, because what he just mentioned is something that, from my perspective, when I look at these things, I've always thought that Facebook will be the one platform that will totally disrupt global film and television. Simply because when you have 2 billion people on a platform, if they decide to open it up, not even if, when they decide. I think it's just a function of when. Because Facebook Watch, which already exists, has already been commissioning. They came after most of the biggest producers 2 years ago and set up the pipeline, right? So you have to track that. I think that there's a reason why YouTube is the biggest platform that content is on the continent. And it's simply because they have the biggest, that's where everybody is, yeah? So the telcos right now, specifically MTN and Airtel, are building and launching their own platforms. And that's basically to take you off YouTube at some point in time. And anybody who's in this space is in a way competing with YouTube and Facebook. So definitely social media platforms impact everything. But I think that the question about live, I think that, with traditional television, live is principally about, a lot of it is about sport. It's about the ability to watch live sport. And sport drives and has driven enormous revenues for everybody involved in playing the game, running the game, the athletes, the broadcasters, plus the money for the rights is incredible. But of course, if you're a startup in Africa, you don't have money for sport. So the African opportunity has got to be local content. That's our opportunity. And I think that's the whole reason why I actually think television, the TV space, should be, I don't know why it isn't. Well, I think I know why it isn't in Nigeria, but it should be. I mean, I discuss this with Emeka quite often that yesterday Moses Babatope did an incredible presentation in this room, overview of the last 5 years of the cinema industry, Nollywood and everything. And we saw some real numbers that have been generated, numbers that have been created. The thing that stood out for me is the zero contribution of Nigerian television industry to those numbers, which says to me that we have a significant problem with the model for television in Nigeria. That's linear television. We have a problem with the TV advertising model in Nigeria. And that is why content producers in Nigeria are typically not happy. So we have to address that to get to these opportunities, because it's going to be, in Nigeria, it's going to be a function between the DSO, between the social media platforms, how we work with them, individual SVODs, and the TV model, because the TV model here is not working. We can't be in reverse of the rest of the world and expect to progress. So I think we have to sort the linear television market. When you sort that out, and I'd like to ask him the question about that, because when you sort that out, and for me it's a business model thing. It's the DSO, it's how do you monitor content and how do you value it? Because right now, all we seem to be doing is selling airtime.
So, just a quick one on that, right? Because some has proposed that maybe the internet, right, will enable the traditional broadcasters to move to linear TV, to move to live TV. But from what you have explained right now, it's not really about the technology, it's about the business model.
I don't think that it's about them moving to anything.
Yeah.
Your BBC, you're already multi-platform. You're on every platform. Yeah?
I mean, Nigeria
Channels is on every platform.
Yeah.
AIT is on every platform. They're all on YouTube. That's not the issue. Okay. The problem is they're selling airtime instead of focusing on programming and commissioning. If they were commissioning content and they were actually pushing, then the eyeballs in the Nigerian market would be watching a channel based on the content.
All right.
Nobody here watches any television except, Channels News at 10. That's it. So we have 300 TV stations producing nothing and 10,000 independent producers producing everything.
All right.
There's a gap. It's not even a gap. It's a valley. It's a I don't know what to call it, but it's
wow.
Yeah. So for me, it's a function of, so the broadcasters will tell you they're broke. Yeah. Advertisers advertisers are just not talking. So there's a problem between media buying, advertisers, and broadcasters. Broadcasters have to be able to make money to be able to commission people, but broadcasters are stuck in a model of selling their airtime to exist, not relying and not believing that if they had, let's say if they produced a TV show that was called Emeka and Friends, and that's Emeka over there. If that happened to be the biggest TV show in Nigeria, right? There's no broadcaster right now that seems to have the confidence, except Iroko, Ebony Life, Africa Magic, and a few others, that content will keep their station on air. So think about that. That in every country, broadcasters are on air because of their content, not because of their airtime sales.
All right.
So
Thanks
that's...
so much. Genga, sorry, what's your take on that? I mean, yeah.
Okay, responding to Emeka's wonderful presentation, I would like to say first and foremost that we need to view technology for what it is, for what it truly is. And I am not being negative, but I see technology as a friendly robber, always coming in to help. And that's why they call technology an enabler. But it always lives with everything. You know, so we had a problem, we had a population at the time of about 130 million people, and we had 250,000 telephone lines. You know, we decided to introduce technology to it, and we brought in GSM mobile phones. And today, I don't know if people still have fixed lines in Nigeria. It eroded that market from 250,000, maybe to today 5,000. The bankers thought their OPEX in creating more branches is getting higher and higher, and they decide to introduce online banking. Today, because of the convenience that offers us, not a lot of us go to the branches anymore. Globally, online branches is killing, online banking is killing the branches. If we juxtapose that on the subject under discussion, it will tell you a bit about the future of TV. But what I would say is, at least for today, is a challenge. Like you said, we have lots of independent producers, and they need to deepen the reach of their content. And today, technology would offer that. Whether it would take it all away, tomorrow we'll decide. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Mba, to the point on, I'm so curious about the social TV, that flow that Ryan started. It was really, what's your take in terms of how does it benefit local producers in Nigeria specifically, right? And how does that flow filter into Africa? Because considering Facebook alone, from what has been highlighted especially by Mr. Obi Asika, is that the biggest disruptor is going to be Facebook and the other, like YouTube. But YouTube, maybe not. But how does that enable or empower local producers? What do they wait while Facebook figures it out? Because there's a lot of value chain that you have created, payment system, understand. In terms of consumer behaviors, Facebook has it, right? In terms of monetization of those content, So how does that impact on content production?
Let me say something. Just kind of like touch on what Gbenga has said, and maybe I don't want to be alarmist, but there is a possibility that with this growing chasm that Obi talked about within television content, traditional, television being driven by content rather than sell of airtime, and where audiences are beginning to move away and only, rather than rely on television, only snack on traditional television. And with the mediation of technology itself coming into play. And when you look at what has happened, like Gbenga said, with traditional PTSN, telephone lines not being adequate, so there was this chasm within the number, and then mobile came and everybody gravitated to mobile, and then landline sort of fizzled. There is a possibility, perhaps far-fetched now, that technology, digital technology and OTT technology, and I think I alluded to that a little bit, will provide an opportunity for a complete transition to this model, actually just totally bypassing the so-called DSO.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the demographics of the young people today, how many people in this room watched NTA last night? Has anybody watched NTA? No, please, if you did, we're not going to shame you. Just show us your hand. So yeah, why did you watch it? Exactly, I pointed that out. So you wanted it for some bit of reliability, isn't it? Because there was so much coming at you from different directions, you just wanted somebody to bring it all together. Now, if they're not doing that, job, you're going to find that somebody will do that job, just the same way that mobile did with versus analog lines. So this analog anchor that we seem to rely on, yeah, will just be, it'll be cut. And everybody will gravitate. The only thing, this big challenge to that is connectivity. Because once the mobile networks are able to provide reliable connectivity, yeah, and we probably will bypass that. And that may not just be a feature of the existing mobile networks. Because, I talked about 5G in a different conversation, but remember that 5G should not be seen as the exclusive preserve of the existing mobile network. And that's the interesting thing about 5G. It is both an infrastructure play and it is also a service play. in the sense that you talked about Facebook. Facebook, trust me, I work with global companies. They have a bunch of guys sitting in a room. All they do is just think how to come out of the box. And so it is not impossible, or indeed it's not unlikely, that you will have the players like Facebook or some other person who wants to be a Facebook for Africa. Because, clearly Facebook as a business is totally substitutable. Yeah. It's not a business that you cannot substitute. It's just that they have the numbers. So for me, I see that, and I think the government should be very careful, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa, because once your hold on traditional television is the fact that you provide a license, is the fact that you provide spectrum, and therefore this scarcity mentality, this analog anchor is in place. Once that analog anchor is disrupted by digital, then you have a problem. Then you sit in a world where everybody goes to consume stuff through, and there might be a new, how do we license that? But how do you license something that you did not provide them like a spectrum for? But with regards to content players, to specific answers to your question, my viewpoint is that people are going to continue to produce content regardless. No one told Lasisi Elenu to produce content. No one told Maraji to produce content. No one told, and there was no even incentive for them that said, go and produce so that you get this. They just produced because the technology was there. So I think that is the play. That is a play. You continue to find that you have this snackable content, and once people form that appetite, there will be a linkage between long-form content and this kind of snackable content. So I would just say to people who are in the content business, just continue to do what you do. Do not sit with the expectation that sometime down the line, a Facebook is going to come or somebody's going to come and offer you to do. Actually, just keep doing, and they will come. But not because don't sit and expect them to come for you to produce. Just keep producing. Whether it be, and there's no, I think I talked about it at the Filmic Forum the other day, where I talked about people have this expectation that it has to be great quality content. It's absolutely not true anymore. You saw it, okay, I didn't quite show that slide, where there's premium content, but there's a lot of value in the long tail content, where a lot of this snackable content, a lot of people go there, because the premium content may be very expensive, they can afford it, but they can obviously afford to snack on Maraji's content. So just keep producing content, and I think that's, you don't have to worry about whether it's fantastic. No one, a lot of people don't even care about fantastic anymore to start with.
All right. So back to you, Ryan. Then I'll ask. So in terms of on-demand, we've seen the gravitation and your point on social TV and all that. So do the emerging on-demand service providers like Netflix, like View, and other like Iroko, do they still have a space in terms of potentially, versus social TV? Because the concept of social TV just changed my own mind as well in terms of live TV. So is there still a space for cohabitation between the two?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So maybe just a little bit of background on me and where I actually come from. So 2014, pre-Netflix launch, working with a fiber operator in the UK, the equivalent to Main One in Nigeria, laying lots of fiber in the ground. The next question is, we have to have a content service so people start using our fiber network, right? Netflix is not in Africa, let's go out and build an OTT service, which we did. And we launched it, and it failed. And then Netflix launched. And then Showmax launched. And then I went and started a company called Kwese back a few years ago. And recently, that's just shut down. So I get a call from a guy by the name of Nikhil sitting in Silicon Valley, and he says, Ryan, we've heard about what you've done. We want to start an OTT service in Africa. And I'm like, seriously, I don't know if that's the right way to invest your money. There's easier ways to do things. Maybe OTT in Africa is not what you should be doing. And he said, no, come out to meet us, and we'll tell you why we think that this is a good opportunity. So I say to my wife, another OTT service, she's like, please, just don't do it. And I'm like, no, I'm going. Anyway, we go and meet these guys, and long story short, I was totally convinced. And why was I convinced? Because the company called View, which is owned by PCCW Group, today has almost 40 million monthly active users across 17 countries. Never heard of the brand, never come across it. And the question is, how did you get that big? And the principles behind what we've done is adopting emerging market countries. And what does that mean? It's not just about the content. Obviously, the content is local content is king. Someone yesterday said quality content is king, but local quality content is king. It's also about not putting together a platform that is purely a paid media platform. Netflix is paid. You can't go and look at Netflix without giving them your credit card details, and the same thing with Showmax and all these other services. So when you look at the landscape of OTT services across emerging markets that have been successful, the only OTT option is YouTube. And YouTube are not adopting Africa. So anyway, to answer your question, Daniel, I think the option and the opportunity for us is to create a freemium service, free content and paid for content, and that's what we've basically developed. And View has launched in Africa, in South Africa. We have more users than Netflix in South Africa in a short space of time. We launched in March. We have more users than Showmax as well. More than that. So I think it comes down to getting the right content, and we did that. We acquired exclusive content rights to, I call them the equivalent to Game of Thrones. So the Game of Thrones in South Africa is Uzalo, Skeem Saam, SABC content produced by producers, commissioned by the broadcaster, ETV as well. So you're talking about 5 or 6 pieces of content that's actually running the entire viewership and audience. We also did a local production this year. We produced a daily drama series called Isipo, which went into production. We launched it on the 1st of July. Very successful. So we're embracing local. We're producing, we're licensing content, and the goal is to now look to launch across the continent.
Yeah, to you, sir, the problem is that one of the issues that Ryan raised, one of the successes that View has in the past 7-8 months is about the business model, right? Premium content available for free. And that really just shot up the numbers. Within 6-7 months, 1 million active users. So back to you on the issue of social TV. So how do you see that playing out vis-a-vis other OTT players like Netflix and other local players?
Yeah, I think, first of all, let me just shake your hand. Because 1 million active users in 6 months is incredible. I never heard of that. Not in Nigeria, and certainly not around this sort of businesses. And obviously with his experience, he probably knows that better than we do. But I think everybody loves free. I think, in Africa, it has been a pricing game from day one, yeah? So obviously Netflix, even if you look at Nigeria, Netflix has, 300 and something thousand in SA. Clearly, doesn't have up to half of that in Nigeria. So the first thing is to understand that we are poor. We are poor. And we are poor in terms of There's no shame in that. We don't have the money to afford. Most Africans don't have the money to afford Netflix. That's just a fact of life, right? So if you're aiming for Netflix, you're dealing with the 0.01%. If you're with View Africa, Iroko, AfroEvo, you're aiming for everybody. It's a simple thing. So YouTube is actually the biggest already because YouTube is free. The man sitting next to him is doing billions of views per annum on YouTube with African content and is the biggest African content provider on the continent. But he's not talking. But it's a fact. But the thing about it is that it's a model, So I think there's space across the value chain for everybody. The issue about it is when this market begins to really funnel independent producers. Because what you have is, in my view, Asabab needs to become literally, Asabab is already a production hub for Nollywood. But what Asabab really needs, is perhaps not just to have 600 producers with their independent Nollywood channels, right? But maybe to consolidate into one platform. You understand? Because a brand actually brings you attention. What Emeka was talking about is discovery. At the end of the day, all of us here know that if you go on your phone today, I don't know how many apps most people in the room have on their phone, but most people have at least 100. They're already pre-installed on your phone. Most people do not even open 10% of those apps. But you will find that everybody opens Google, everybody opens WhatsApp, everybody opens Facebook, almost everybody opens Instagram. So if you look at these four are the four obvious big disruptors. If you're a gamer, you know about Twitch. If you do gaming, Twitch is like WhatsApp on steroids, right? So I think that it's not anything to be afraid of. I think, for me, paradise is coming for producers because what you're talking about is more and more platforms who will need more and more content. They will either license it, acquire it, or commission it. And the key, what you're trying to get into in this market is to have more players who can commission. Because that will then actually affect the other side of the ecosystem. Because the platforms are always going to keep coming, but you need the producers to be fed. Otherwise, the snack stuff is wonderful. But we're also looking at, I think Iroko produced something like, or ROK produced something like 500 movies and 26 TV series in the last 3 years. That's phenomenal. Imagine if you had 20 TV stations in Nigeria producing at that scale. Just imagine what that means. And all that content doesn't just live on linear television. It then travels in through all the different places. So I think what has happened is social media has unlocked African production creativity. So everybody sitting in their bedroom is a creator, whether it's Laseni, whether you're popular, you have 10 million followers or 10 followers, everybody's producing content. Where it goes is a totally different thing.
Thanks. Actually, just one last question before we go to Q&A in the next 2 minutes. Now, in closing from our side, before we start doing Q&A, one, I want to throw the question at you. What needs to happen for traditional TV for them to survive? What needs to happen? I don't know if we have anybody from the traditional TV here. Your take.
Okay, before I answer that, I also want to, first of all, speak in terms that we all understand. I know that some of us here are producers or content producers, and some of us here are distributors as well. But first of all, I want us to look at it from two perspectives. We have short-form contents and we have long-form contents. Why I want to talk about this is because I have a lot of you here are my friends, and we know the issues that are facing us. For short-form content, technology has made it such that you can bypass a lot of big players, and we have a lot of short content producers who are making it big. In fact, these days it seems as if they are progressing even more than people that produce movies and all whatnot. even though that movies cost a lot, much more to produce. So some of us here can produce such content for short, form content. And let me tell you, you just need to know your audience and zero in on them, and you're going to be successful. For long, form content, it's a bit challenging, because for that we still need distribution outlets. I distribute on YouTube, so I know much. I dwell on YouTube. My friends here also dwell on different platforms. If I may talk from the YouTube perspective, I will still say that YouTube is still the highest payer, in terms of paying out to content producers, because I can confidently tell you that we have paid out billions of naira to content producers. But be that as it may, it's still very small compared to what is needed in that space. And gradually, we've seen movie productions declining. If you go to Alaba Market now, most of the places that we used to sell movies, they are no longer there. Most productions are now coming from the East because, they are not as fast as moving to the digital space as here in Lagos. But it's going to catch up with everybody. So sometimes it's a bit scary, and, we begin to think, how do we salvage this very hopeless situation? And that is why I applaud Ijoma for having a forum like this. It's more of a forum where we have to listen to each other, because there's a problem in the system that needs to be solved. But the more we listen to each other, the more we find common ground. Now, we're also working, like, from our forever's, we're also working on some things and some platforms that we also, look at. My friend here, they deal with the big premium guys, but there are a lot of producers there that may not be able to have a slice of that cake. The major problem here is that no matter the number of distribution that we have, it's good that we increase on them, but no matter the number we have, it's not going to be enough for now. So I look at the cinema houses, we don't have enough. We look at other people that buy, talk of the DSTVs, talk of Hiroko, who else? Then, of course, they just launched. But it's not still enough to, to take care of our needs. So which means we have to think outside the box. And how do we also carry everybody along? I think that is a big question. Yeah, thank you very much for now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. He doesn't want the preferred solution for traditional TV. No, it's fine. Benga, one statement. What needs to happen? Because I need to take questions from the audience. One word.
Okay. Like I did earlier, I'm not going to tell you.
Because we don't want to kill NTA and our friends Silverbird and all that. So what needs to happen for them to survive?
So like I did earlier, I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen, but I'll give you a pointer.
Yeah.
What exactly happened to traditional newsprint media in Nigeria? And I would answer it. If they hadn't gone online, the time they went online, the likes of Premium News, Instablog Niger, Linda Ikeji will have run them out of the market. One thing that they did rightly was the fact that they understood there's a generation coming who would not go either stand in the junction, bus stop to read newspaper or buy newspaper and litter places with it. They would rather read online. So they went to where they are, which is online, and right there, today, they don't print up to 1 million newspapers in Nigeria. But on a daily basis, the newsprints have over 10 million views.
Okay. All right. Mr. Imba, in wrapping up, what needs to happen before I go to the audience?
I just think that, I will echo what Wenga has said. They need to go where the audiences are. The audiences are going increasingly online. They're going increasingly mobile. But the other thing is not just that where the audiences are going, but what do the audiences want and like? What would they like to see? Therefore, they should, focus programming content around that kind of thing. I mean, as I also said, there's a lot of strength that existing broadcasters have. They have huge library.
Yeah.
That library is worth millions.
Yeah.
And so they need to audit the library and take it online.
Yeah.
And let people find them and make it easy for people to navigate and find them.
Yeah.
And that I think is the number one strength
That's right.
that they can easily exploit to stay alive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, I mean, this is so true because even in South Africa, SABC, the national broadcaster, is literally struggling. Several times have been bailed out by the government, but they've got huge library that they don't even know what to do with it, really. So 3 things. I mean, content, we said. They need to invest more in content. Number 2, technology, which is the enabler. So number 3, of course, follow the audiences where they are going. I think those are the key takeaways from what we've had so far. Content, and all that. So I just want to take 3 questions quickly. Please stick to what we've discussed, especially if you have any question to ask on Mr. Emeka Mba's presentation earlier on and what we've discussed here so far. Okay.
I'm glad to be here. My name is Mark Akwetie. My question is to Mr. Emeka Mba. I want to really ask him, based on the current dynamics occasioned by the emerging technologies, can you just tell us dwell more on the implications? You have said some, you have mentioned some. What are the implications for the regulators? I'm talking of like the NCC, Nigerian Copyright Commission. I'm talking of National Film and Video Censors Board and Nigerian Broadcasting Commission. What are the implications? What are these challenges, and what ways do you think they can go about, solving these problems, especially as it regards to licensing and regulating the contents? Thank you.
Just let me take 2 more questions, then we answer them,
Hi, good day, and congratulations to a great presentation earlier on. I think it's got a valuable insight with regards to where the industry is at the moment and where the industry is going. The question I've got is around short format versus long format and the issue of data. So everybody talks about OTT, but no one's talked about the cost of data. How do we get the MNOs to play along in terms of making data more accessible, getting the pricing right, putting bundles together that makes it more accessible to the largest market in Africa? And then just one other point, there's some interesting things happening out of the US, when you look at these content wars. One of the most interesting developments is New TV. I don't know if you guys have heard of New TV. QB is the holding company run by Steven Katzenberg, Meg Whitman, that have partnered with the studios. So they've raised $1.5 billion from the likes of Disney, from the likes of Warner, from the likes of Universal, to put together good quality Hollywood-style content in bite-sized chunks, kind of like short format. So just kind of get your view on those different aspects would be great.
All right, thanks. The last person? One more person? None? Okay. Mr. Mba first.
So, for me, in terms of regulators, thank you, Mark. I mean, that's my constituency, so to speak. First principle is definition. And so my rule is this: anything I cannot define, whether it's be a service, technology, whatever the thing is, a market, a service, I don't even attempt to want to regulate it. So the first thing for the regulators to do is understand what do they want to regulate? What is that thing that they want to regulate? What is the service? What is the market? What is the intendment? What do you want the regulation to achieve? And it must be clear. And the cost of regulation should also be established, because regulatory decisions, as far as it meets industry, comes at a cost. At a cost to you, the regulator, and a cost to the industry, and a cost to the consumer. So you need to be able to know what is the cost, and it should be well defined. And it comes from the point of definition. And in all of this, the second thing is do no harm. Because regulators we always have this penchant to want to do something because it's expected of us, because the public demands it, because the governments, they are our masters. I've been in situations where people say to me, DG, you have to act. The villa expects us to act. Act based on what? Based on what availability? Based on the fact that someone potentially influential wrote an article saying XYZ must do this. And then you act without establishing what you want to regulate, defining it, and what is the cost. Because and that's why you flip-flop. And that's why regulators will move in a certain direction, and then suddenly when there's an outcry, and then they'll move back. So we need to be careful. Obviously, regulators work, you work to the benefit of the consumer, but they also work within a political environment, because you have political masters who expect you to move in a certain direction. So there is a tendency to want to balance that, but I always feel that that decision should be a well thought out decision, and a decision that you can justify as a regulator. Anything in my experience in the many years I've worked as a regulator, if I cannot make a justification, if I cannot justify it to myself and to my colleagues and to the people that I will often shy away from it. And I've been in situations where at the very top, the number one person in the country will say, do this. And I've had situations where I'll say to that person, no, sir, I will not do it. And it's cost me, but that's it. And so some other people will do something differently. At some point, it's personal. With regards to data costs, I think that the obvious challenges in terms of the cost of infrastructure, cost of rollout in our market. The telcos have faced this running battle, right-of-way charges. You have federal charges, you have local charges, you have local government charges, you have a multiplicity of, and then again, it's this whole thing of regulatory, because regulators, when I mean regulators, policymakers, including government, often see businesses as an opportunity to take money from. So you have this, how should I put it, almost like a rentier system where we just keep collecting rent, rather than creating an environment that it enables. So it's a big challenge, but it's a mindset thing. I spoke again of that. If we are able to really give the telcos, provide some incentives, because even on in terms of rural areas, where a large percentage of our population is still residing, coverage is extremely poor. A couple of weeks ago, we heard in the presentation I was in that we talk about 4G in Nigeria. The percentage of people with 4G in Nigeria is, I think it's about 14% or something like that. What is that? And so you cannot consume content on 2G. You spend an eternity trying to download something. So we need to create an incentive system for telcos to make an investment. In some countries, they have, especially in Nordic countries, they have this philosophy where, if you roll out more, we tried a little bit of that when I was in Film and Video Census, when I was in Broadcasting Commission, where we said we won't charge you a certain license, rather than charging 2 billion a certain license fee. What we'll do will be you will use a portion of that and invest in infrastructure. So it's just smart ways of doing that, but I think that's critical. In terms of short-form content, I think that for me, my philosophy of content is very straightforward. I believe in local content, principally. That's number one. And I believe that no content that is produced is irrelevant in this day and age. It may not meet the quality that some people expect, but it's not irrelevant. So my own, as I said earlier, is for people to continue to produce what they can produce, but work in a partnership with other people to improve the craft. And but ultimately, for big players like this, realize that short form content is really a conveyor belt to long form. and to make that investment in short form content.
Thank you so much. In closing, 1 minute each, please. Benga, to the question, I'm so interested in the issue of data, right? 1 minute. Is there a strategy that needs to happen? What's the strategic focus, both for all the stakeholders, because that is very integral to actual development of OTT or feature TV in Nigeria?
Okay.
1 minute.
I would say that Emeka has addressed that from the supply side. I would just want to add that for it to be sustainable, I think the regulator will have to come into play. If you really want to grow an industry, you have to birth it. You have to midwife it. And in that case, so we can have things like the mobile operators introducing video bundles, you know, whereby you're hosting the content locally so that they're not exposed to internet charge themselves. But the other thing is that I think the data thing is also a bit mystified. I don't think the problem is as much as we make it or it appears to be, because the unoptimized content are actually also the most watched. They are the largest form of content. YouTube, encourages user-generated content, and therefore their content are not optimized. So you could watch a 1-hour movie on YouTube that will take up 3 gigabytes of your data, while you can watch the same in an optimized environment like, say, Netflix, that will take up 500 megabytes. But YouTube keeps getting watched the more than Netflix. Then we have all this WhatsApp group where people send all sorts of videos and people watch them. You know, it costs a lot, but I don't think, because you're not paying, you see, I think the barrier is more of the entry fee. You have to keep paying $10 a month. I think the fact that they're not paying anything they can see, it's more of an incentive than the fact that, you know, they have to pay entry fees.
All right.
That's why I believe that the problem of payment is more than the problem of data.
Wow, okay. So it still boils down to business model, boils down to...
Yeah, well, I think he's talking about airtime billing
Yeah.
in terms of integration, right? Which is obviously going to happen for a lot of the people that are coming. I think the point he made about data and about Quibi is very interesting, because short-form content is clearly $1 billion opportunity that Hollywood and the whole world has seen. In Nigeria, we perhaps the gap in Nigeria and the opportunity in Nigeria, and that really we need to look at as Nigerians, is about consolidation. Okay. Yeah, how do we build scale in terms of local producers, local brands, building scale, collaborating to actually have leverage? Because the truth of the matter, as he said, to some extent, yes, it's about payment. But if I told you that, just speaking from the music side now, right, that our musicians, for example, if you look at the numbers, the streaming numbers in Nigeria, based on our population, and our streaming numbers in Kenya, based on their population, our music does better in Kenya. That's scary. We are not even touching what we are supposed to be touching based on the size of our market. And that's why everybody's coming to our market. That's the same thing that Murphy's talking about, that we are only literally scratching the surface of servicing our opportunity. So at some point in time, all the thousands and millions of small-scale startups, independent producers, have to consolidate. They have to aggregate themselves or partner with somebody to create brands. And the thing you missed, by the way, for traditional television is the brand, right? BBC means something. Fox means something. ESPN, Sky, they mean something. And by the way, apart from musicians and pop stars, the biggest brands on social media are media brands. People always forget this, right? So Facebook publishes over 60 million businesses that are on Facebook. 60 million. Not 6 million, not 600,000. Probably 100 million by now that have business pages on Facebook. So think about what that means. So for us, I think the opportunity is, the whole world should know, if we don't know, that we are the opportunity. The moment is now. It's not about potential, right? The TV model has to shift. But I think the OTT guys, the technology guys, are coming to disrupt it hard. We haven't even started talking about specialty channels in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Where's Nigerian history, discovery,
Yeah.
documentaries, sports, cooking? I mean, there's a million channels that can happen in this country. Languages, dances, masquerade, whatever the hell you want to do. No, but seriously, that's what Emeka's talking about. Produce. There's an audience for everything. But the model is key.
Yeah. Ryan?
One minute, okay. Just a few things. So, question around regulation. One of the key things in looking at is the regulation of sport and sports rights. You know, we've seen in the UK how introducing these regulations around exclusive sport rights, unbundling sports rights, creates tremendous opportunity. So I think, you know, if I were a regulator today, I would be trying to introduce that as one key thing. And then the other issue around data and data pricing. So, you know, in South Africa, the inflection point between data revenue and voice revenue with a mobile operator was reached about 18 months ago. Now, if you asked a mobile operator when you reach that point, it was pretty uncertain. So I think the trend around data pricing will come down. It's come down in all the emerging markets that we operate in. By way of example, in India, you can buy 60 GB data bundle for $10. Now, that is, you know, just makes data accessible to everybody. So I think data prices will fall. And another key thing around data pricing and data sensitivity is around Wi-Fi. So with all the technology that we've put together, having the opportunity to download content and watch it offline is a big feature. And I don't see a lot of Wi-Fi hotspots or that kind of opportunity in Nigeria. We've seen a lot of growth in South Africa with Wi-Fi hotspots. So I think part of the ecosystem of connectivity is Wi-Fi, and that's my.
Murphy, in closing, 1 minute, please.
Okay, in closing, I think one of the reasons that you know some people are always concerned about data is because they want, especially in Nigeria, is they want to know, you know, all this population. How do we leverage, you know, on population? Let me tell you something. People are watching. I'll tell you from the back end of my analytics. Some years back, you know, number one is always US. Number two, Great Britain. 3, France, you know, Canada, Europe, South Africa. Nigeria will be somewhere around number 9 or 10. But as we speak today, Nigeria is number 2. So which means a lot more Nigerians are beginning to consume our content here in Nigeria. So I'm telling you from, you know, an informed position. But one parting advice I'd like to give here is that video on demand means video on demand. That is where, you know, some of us are feeling it. Some of us produce content based on what DSTV wants. So, but that is not what it is. Video on demand is where the consumer has the final power to decide, not DSTV deciding for them. That was why I liked part of the, the slide where he was now rushing. I quickly saw something where he said, you know, it is centered around the product, not around the customers, not around the product. You have to think in terms of customers. Let me give you an instance. So some Hollywood stories that we think that are blockbusters or that people normally buy high prices in DSTV. When they come to YouTube, where people have the power to choose, they don't do well. Some of the stories that do well are some of the stories that you look down upon. So the power of the end user to choose what he wants to watch must always be at the back of your mind when you're producing content for them. As for people watching, people are watching every day. Thank you.
As you have heard, thank you so much, guys. So key takeaways: content, very important, quality content. technology, you know, and in terms of the audience as well. We need to consider the audience in kind of producing those content. I hope our session has been very informative for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.